Out in the steppe, the routine of German divisions was a world apart from the fighting in the city. There were defense lines to be held and probing attacks to be repulsed. But life offered a much more conventional existence, especially back from the front. On Sunday, 25th October, the officers of a regiment in the Bavarian 376th Infantry Division invited General Edler von Daniels, their divisional commander, to a Munich Oktoberfest shooting contest. The main preoccupation at that time was the preparation of good winter quarters. "It's not an enticing picture out here," a soldier in the 113th Infantry Division wrote home. "For far and wide there are no villages, no woodland, neither tree nor shrub, and not a drop of water." Russian prisoners and Hiwis were put to work digging bunkers and trenches. "We really need to make good use of these men because we're so short-handed," wrote a senior NCO. Out in the treeless steppe, infantry divisions were forced to send trucks and working parties into Stalingrad to fetch beams from the rubble of destroyed houses for the roofs of their bunkers. South of Stalingrad, the 297th Infantry Division excavated man-made caves in the sides of Balkas to form stables, stores, and eventually an entire field hospital, for which all the equipment arrived by rail from Germany. During the Indian summer of early and mid-October, Germans were keen to get their house ready. Even the youngest soldiers recognized the implications of digging in. They would now be there for the whole winter. Hitler issued his own instructions for the winter. He expected a highly active defense and a proud sense of victory. Tanks were to be protected from the cold and bombardment in specially built concrete bunkers, but the necessary materials never arrived, so vehicles stayed in the open. 6th Army Headquarters also drew up elaborate plans for the winter. Even a finished training film on how to construct a sauna in the field was ordered, but none of these preparations carried much conviction. "The Führer has ordered us to defend our positions to the last man," Grosskreutz wrote home to Germany. "Something we would do of our own accord, since the loss of a position would hardly improve our situation. We know what it would be like to be stranded without shelter in the open steppe." Führer headquarters also decided that the majority of 6th Army's draught animals should be sent over 100 miles to the rear. This would save on the supply trains required to bring forward the huge quantities of fodder. Altogether, some 150,000 horses, as well as a number of oxen and even camels, had accumulated between the Don and the Volga. Motor transport and repair units were also moved back. The reasons behind such a move were understandable from a purely logistical point of view, but it would prove a serious mistake in a crisis. The 6th Army, especially the vast majority of its artillery and medical units, depended almost entirely on horses for their mobility. Morale, according to a sergeant major in the 371st Infantry Division, rises, and the Russians themselves had noticed the number of ill Germans with surprise and spoken of a German sickness. The doctors in Berlin could only speculate that the troops' reduced resistance had been due to cumulative stress and short rations. The most vulnerable appear to have been the youngest soldiers, those aged between 17 and 22. They alone accounted for 55% of these deaths. Whatever the exact causes, there can be no doubt that the health of the 6th Army was already a matter of serious concern in early November, when the worst prospect appeared to be no more than yet another winter in bunkers under the snow. While the Soviet 64th Army launched attacks to bring troops down from Stalingrad, the 57th Army seized a dominant hill between the Romanian 20th and 2nd Infantry Divisions. Further out, down in the Kalmyk steppe, the 51st Army carried out raids deep into the Romanian positions. One night, Senior Lieutenant Alexander Nevsky and his company of submachine gunners infiltrated through the defense line to raid the headquarters of the 1st Romanian Infantry Division in a village to the rear, where they caused chaos. Nevsky was badly wounded twice during the action. The Stalingrad Front Political Department, following the new party line of invoking Russian history, decided that Nevsky must belong to the bloodline of his glorious ancestor. This fearless commander, the full inheritor of his ancestors' glory, was awarded the Order of the Red Banner. In the city, the Great German Offensive had petered out at the very end of October through exhaustion and a lack of ammunition. The last attack by 79th Infantry Division against the Red October factory collapsed on 1 November under heavy artillery fire from across the Volga. The effect of massed enemy artillery has decisively weakened the division's attacking strength, noted 6th Army headquarters. The 94th Infantry Division attacking the northern pocket at Spartakovka was also ground down. In the last 2 days, noted a report to Moscow of 6th November, the enemy has been changing his tactics. Probably because of big losses over the last 3 weeks, they have stopped using large formations. Many soldiers, deprived of vodka, resorted to desperate substitutes. In the worst case, the effects were not immediately apparent. The night after the anniversary celebration, 28 soldiers from 248th Rifle Division died on an approach march out in the Kalmyk steppe. No medical assistance was sought, and nobody admitted to knowing what the matter was. Officers pretended to think that they had died from cold and exertion on the march. The NKVD Special Department was suspicious, however, and autopsies were performed on 24 of the bodies. Death was determined to have been caused by excessive consumption of anti-chemical liquids. The soldiers had drunk large amounts of a solution designed to be taken in minute quantities in the case of a gas attack. This noxious liquid apparently contained some alcohol. One of the survivors was interviewed in hospital. He admitted that someone had claimed it was a sort of wine. The NKVD refused to accept that this might be a straightforward case of theft of army material and drunkenness. The case was deemed to be an act of sabotage to poison soldiers. On 8 November, the day after the anniversary of the revolution, Hitler made a long speech to the Nazi old combatants in the Burger Braukeller in Munich. The broadcast was heard by many in the 6th Army. "I wanted to reach the Volga," he declared with heavy irony. "To be precise, at a particular spot, at a particular city. By chance, it bore the name of Stalin himself. But don't think that I marched there just for that reason. It was because it occupies a very important position. I wanted to capture it, and you should know we are quite content. We have as good as got it. There are only a couple of small bits left. Some say, why aren't they fighting faster? That's because I don't want a second Verdun and prefer instead to do the job with small assault groups. Time is of no importance. No more ships are coming up the Volga, and that is the decisive point." His speech ranked among the greatest examples of hubris in history. During the first 10 days of November, German pressure was kept up with constant small-scale attacks, sometimes with tanks. The fighting may have been in smaller groups, but it was still just as fierce. A company of the 347th Rifle Regiment, dug in only 200 yards forward of the Volga, was down to 9 men when overrun on 6 November. But its commander, Lieutenant Andreev, rallied his survivors and they counterattacked with submachine guns. A group of reinforcements arriving just in time cut off the Germans and saved the 62nd Army's northern crossing point. The Russians carefully watched the German system of signaling with flares and turned it to their own advantage by adapting their color combinations using captured cartridges. One platoon commander was credited with having tricked German artillery into switching their fire at a critical moment onto their own troops. With such narrow strips of no man's land, desertion remained an escape of last resort. But now there were cases of German soldiers attempting to cross the lines. In the center of the sector of 13th Guards Rifle Division, a German soldier slipped forward from one of their defended houses towards a Russian-held building. His action was clearly supported by some of his comrades because they called out, "Rus, don't shoot." But when the man was halfway across no man's land, a newly arrived Russian soldier
Paulus was under heavy strain. His doctor warned him that he was heading for a breakdown if he continued without a rest. Hitler was obsessed with the symbolism of Stalingrad, explained one of Paulus's staff officers. To clean up the last few points of resistance in November, he ordered that even tank drivers should be assembled as infantry for a last push. Panzer commanders were horrified at such a mad waste, but they could not get Paulus to cancel the order. In the end, they tried to scrape together enough reserve drivers, cooks, medical orderlies, and signals staff. In fact, anybody rather than their experienced tank crewmen in order to keep their divisions operational. The very heavy losses in panzer regiments were to prove serious, if not disastrous, within a matter of days. General von Sedlitz was deeply concerned. By the middle of November, 6th Army Headquarters judged that 42% of his battalions must be considered fought out. Most infantry companies were down to under 50 men and had to be amalgamated. Sedlitz was also concerned about the 14th and 24th Panzer Divisions, which needed to refit, ready for the inevitable Soviet winter offensive. In his view, the fighting had been continued far too late into the year. Hitler himself had admitted to him during lunch at Rastenburg that German troops